A lot going on in the news. We've had major banks crash, government bailouts, and the Fed meets next week to talk about raising interest rates. How will that affect you as a home seller or home buyer? We're going to talk about that today. Many of you have asked so many questions and comments. It's kind of overwhelming, and we love it. We appreciate you. It just takes some time getting back to all of your comments and questions. We're a real estate brokerage company here in Maryland, but we have a broker network all over the country, and we try and keep you informed as to what's really going on out there. So, Melissa, thanks for joining me today. Let's dive in and address some of these questions.
Thank you, Todd. Yes, absolutely. I'm ready to do just that. What's at the top of the news right now is that this talk about the 40-year FHA modification to their loan. We had questions coming in about it, and I'm going to address some of those right now. One of our viewers asked two questions, actually. With the 40-year FHA modification loan, what would the new interest be? Also, does a 40-year loan with a high rate and cost of the loan make the payments the same or higher?
You know, this actually came out on March 8th, where FHA had announced that they are supporting the proposed action to go to a 40-year mortgage. I think a lot of this is because they know many people will be defaulting on their loans because the COVID money is running out. So, we started with a mortgage moratorium, whereas if you were affected by the pandemic in a financial way, that you could actually stop payments or remodify your existing mortgage. And there was a lot of relief that went along with that as well. Stimulus money. Biden signed into law the American Rescue Act, which actually, after the mortgage moratorium ended, allowed each state to get a lot of money that if a borrower or a homeowner was still being affected at the end of 21, essentially, which I think it was in July of 21, if the homeowner was still being affected by housing related costs, in many cases, there was up to $50,000 in additional money to help pay for the financial burdens of your mortgage payment, your taxes, your insurance, or housing related costs. And I think now we're getting to the point where, we're at the end of this kind of road, and they're looking at a huge amount of serious delinquencies, mortgages being over 90 days past due. That's when they are considered seriously delinquent. I think looking at these staggering numbers that are being seen, they don't really have a choice but to try and stimulate, some type of program that could potentially prevent a lot more blight like we saw back in 2008 in neighborhoods where people were just turning in the keys, giving up on their homes, and, grass was 2 feet tall. And we remember these days, right? If you can remember what it was like in 2008. So I think FHA is thinking, man, if we see another 2008 crisis, how can we, avoid that? The problem is, and just like this question that we're getting here, Melissa, how will that change the, payment much for a borrower? So what they're talking about doing in this 40-year modification is that if a borrower has experienced default, and even FHA doesn't know all the answers to this, they're writing the guidelines right now to launch this by May 8th, if it launches on time. And basically, the question or the concern is, if they're recasting this mortgage balance from a 30-year to a 40-year, will the interest rates be capped? If they bought at a very low interest rate, and this is for FHA modifications, by the way. So, what will those rates be? Will there be fees associated with it? Because, FHA isn't writing the loan, they're just insuring the loans. So it's going to have to kick back to the mortgage company, which, quite honestly, the few loan officers that I've talked to that are struggling to make their bills because they've finally, crashed too, along with everybody else in the real estate market, is they're excited. They're thinking that, geez, this could be a great opportunity for us to rewrite some loans and make more money. But the fact is, we just don't know that information yet. There were a lot of comments and concerns that, with the higher interest rates, it may not make a difference in their monthly payment.
I've been doing some thinking over the past 2.5 years. A lot of these buyers have been conventional loans. So is there going to be a relief for them in the future? A lot of these buyers used all of their money in their savings.
So, that's a great question. As of right now, there is no conventional, conversion to a 40-year mortgage. I hope there never is. Not for the people that are in the situation, but I think the more we loosen the concept of, having a 40-year mortgage, I think the more that we start hearing it in the news, if we do go to a 40-year mortgage, gosh, this would be, in my opinion, catastrophic. And that's a good point. So, what I want to try and point out here is that, people aren't really good at saving money. In fact, when we look back at some of the charts, when we're looking at Fred data, the charts are showing us that during the pandemic, we were actually at an all-time high in our savings accounts because of stimulus, because people weren't going anywhere. They were saving money. In just 2 years, we went to being the best savers to the worst savers. And that's because of a lot, right? It's because of affordability's gone out the window. So we've had to spend that savings to live. But it also comes at the cost of making a lot of bad spending choices. And now we're seeing some of the highest debt. Well, when you take a home, for instance, when somebody buys a home, they are expecting that land is going to appreciate over time like it has, right? And that, they, by paying their mortgage payment, it even acts as sort of like a savings account. Because if they stay in there 10 years, they do buy down the principal balance. So regardless of a lot of appreciation, they still have a lot of sort of cash equity, because if they've paid down the loan, even if the cost of the house or the price of the house only appreciated 10% in 10 years, they still are in a situation where they have savings that they've packed away in paying their monthly payment. Well, when we take that to a 30-year out to a 40-year note for a longer period of time, you're paying primarily mortgage interest payments and making the lenders very wealthy. All the while, you're not really making a dent in the principal balance. So my concern is just from a standpoint of not having that savings when you sell your house that you've been investing and buying your principal down, I think that, it will be a catastrophic move, and that really, we're just destroying, in my opinion, the dream of home ownership.
Speaking of the debt, and knowing our country, the debt is just growing and growing. We had a viewer make a comment that's actually on the flip side of that. They said, credit cards are punishing you by closing your accounts because of low utilization or for paying it off. It's a no-win situation.
Yeah, and I do know that for a fact because I've had a couple credit cards that sent me a letter basically saying that they were taking my very robust and generous credit limit down to like $500, which is ridiculous. I'd shred the card at that point. But there is the threat, right? You're thinking in the back of your head, you don't want to get rid of the card. You don't want to get rid of the available balance, because if things get really, really bad, there is a resource for me to get some money. So I think that what's happening is overall, these credit card companies are really gouging consumers more than ever. We've enticed them to spend money. We've all fallen trapped to it. Many of us I know have fallen trapped to it, myself included, to having that available balance. And the rates were so ridiculously low over the last couple of years that, why not? Hey, you want that deck on the back of your house? Let's go ahead and put it on the credit card. It's a low interest rate. And now all of a sudden we're seeing where those low interest rates for even good borrowers are, and good credit holders are 17.99%, 18.99%. We know that for some that maybe missed a payment or that aren't paying off the balance in full, we've seen credit card companies charging as much as 29.99%. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that is the cap of what they're allowed to charge. I'm not really sure, but I know that is happening to many people with credit card debt.
Todd, you've made comment that houses are a depreciating asset. I want to address this question that came in from one of our viewers. Inherently, most things purchased depreciate over time. For example, cars, clothes, electronics, etc. Why does home prices often seem to be so immune to any depreciation factor?
Melissa, this is a great question because a lot of people, they want to know, does my house depreciate or appreciate? And depending on, when you bought your house, you may, if you bought in the height of 2006, it took you 10 or 12 years if you ever could get out of your house. And then depending on whether you updated it, you may not sell that house for what you paid. There's a huge difference, okay, when we're looking at what appreciates and what depreciates. The actual home itself depreciates. You have to continually spend money because it goes through steps of obsolescence. And in fact, if you're a real estate investor, one of the benefits of investing in real estate and having rental properties is on a rental property, a home, you can depreciate the structure itself over 27 and a half years. In fact, you must take that depreciation. Now, I'm not an accountant, check with your own accountant, but I am a real estate investor. And I know that if you don't take it, you're actually recapturing that regardless of whether you took it or not when you go to sell your house. So why does the house structure depreciate? Well, there are many factors. Things go wrong. It breaks, it wears out. A perfect example is if you're buying a house today that has aluminum wiring, a lot of people don't want that, right? So, products that were used years and years and years ago have been replaced. And if the house is not updated, then people are looking at that as sort of like, a deduction. However, the reason why real estate appreciates overall throughout the history of time is the land itself. Okay, so let's keep in mind, one of the things that we know about real estate, it's location, location, location. They didn't say it's the home structure, the home structure, the home structure. So when we're looking at real estate, why have the values gone up so much? It's because more people want to live in that area. And so we see, some of the places that have the biggest job growth, the biggest, demand growth for vacation homes, things like that. What happens is the competition actually, because of the home's location, increases that property's value. And if you don't believe me on this, take property values like Detroit, for instance, when, they were completely wiped out from the automotive days. I mean, home values dropped for decades. So, what we have to look at here is, when you hear me talking about a home being a depreciating asset, this is not necessarily a bad thing. This is not telling you don't buy a home, but there are financial advisors that will tell you that the number one reason in a lot of cases that people get to the retirement age and they don't have enough money to live, right, is because they overpaid for a home. Right? They bought a property that was too expensive for them. Now the numbers are crazy, like 33% national average of your income is going to your home, right? Where before the national average was like 24% of your income. So we're seeing where we're working more for the home, right? Because the prices are so high. And guys, I got to tell you, when you're financing, and we're talking about 40-year mortgages, this is ludicrous to me. So when we're looking at this kind of thing, that's why I preach to people, buy what you can afford, right? But anyway, hopefully that satisfies some of those questions.
One of our viewers had a statistical comment regarding foreclosures. 2 million non-current mortgages, 237,000 in foreclosure. By June, 70% of the 456,000 mortgages in forbearance could be added to foreclosures as COVID emergencies end.
Melissa, I'm not sure about the exact numbers. I mean, there are statistics out there, but, depending on where you're looking, what source, it's really hard to get the information and get it straight. And a lot of this is backward-looking data. But I do believe that we will have an enormous amount of people that will face foreclosure coming up in the next 12 to 18 months. It only makes sense. And it doesn't matter to me whether they bought the house, 10 or 15 years ago even, because really what is at question right now is the state of our economy. And we know that people are saving less money, and without some kind of continued bailout, where will this relief come from? Especially if we don't see deflation, and we're only seeing disinflation, where the already high prices will need to be met with a growing paycheck. And, one of the concerns that I have is that a lot of these borrowers or people that are struggling right now are people that are in their 50s, and when you look at, we wanted to retire or hope to retire at a decent age, maybe in their mid 60s. That the fact of the matter is that any type of job loss to this group of people really puts them at a disadvantage, because a lot of employers, they don't want to hire people that are in their 50s, or if they do, they don't maybe want to pay them enough money that they would need to, really be able to survive. So I think we have a lot of issues that are going on right now that no one seems to be talking about. But more importantly, I do believe that FHA in themselves believe that there will be significant amount of hardship on borrowers and people that have been in default. That's why they're coming out with this new program. And by the way, VA has had this 40-year loan modification in place. So FHA is just trying to mirror that so that they're consistent with the VA program, remodification program. Not really sure how many people have taken or will take advantage of it. And, it's kind of hard to tell, because they have been so many other modification programs and workouts where, Washington just does not want to see massive foreclosures.
With everything going on in the news, we had a viewer wondering what you thought of the future. Have you changed your forecast for 2023 home prices dropping, given recent developments, 40-year mortgages, lower mortgage rates, dovish Fed, etc.?
Some of my fellow real estate experts want to say that they were right with home prices, that home prices wouldn't drop. And I think that we all know that home prices have dropped. We know some of the, least affordable markets, Las Vegas, Nashville, Seattle, Los Angeles, they have been some of the least markets that people can afford to buy a home in. But we've seen, Phoenix, Tampa, Charlotte, we've seen the biggest declines in some of these states, and they were some of the highest to rise during the last several years. I don't believe that I will switch my forecast that home prices continue to decline, based on a couple factors. Number one, interest rates, regardless if they reprieve a little bit, they're still way higher than they were a year ago. And, the home prices even close to where they were a year ago, with this more than doubling of interest rates since then. People just can't afford the payments. So I think from an affordability factor, yes, our inventory's low. And I do see where days on the market nationwide are increasing, especially if the agent doesn't price the house right. But from the beginning of April of 22, when I said that the seller's market was turning, I had predicted that we would see on average a 10% price decline. I do think it's still going to be market specific. What we're not seeing is ridiculous overspending where we witnessed just a year ago with people coming to the table on average, a national average 10% over list price, paying $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 over appraised value, using their cash. We're not seeing that madness anymore. In fact, if the home price is not priced at a value where people, are willing to pay, they're just saying, no thanks.
There you have it, guys. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving us your insight and asking your questions.
And please know, guys, I don't have a crystal ball. I know, we fall under a lot of scrutiny, just trying to give you education, trying to bring you what we see, what I see, serving this real estate industry for more than 33 years now, more specifically the housing market. And guys, so we do appreciate you. If you like the video, you felt you got some value out of it, hit the thumbs up. It will let Melissa and I know that you did. As always, guys, we appreciate it when you subscribe to our channel. Hit that alert bell, and please don't keep this information to yourself. If you found value, share it with your friends. Hopefully they'll find value too. See you next time.
See you next time.
Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.